everyone, and welcome to Healing Through Sharing. I'm Rosanna from Balanced Path, and today I have with me Ahmad-Shah Duranai. Ahmad is a best-selling author, live and lead by design coach, educator, speaker, community activist, and master trainer of verbal Aikido. And Ahmad comes from an architectural background and has worked as a project manager for many, many years. He is also the founder and head coach of DuraNet Enterprises, Inc., where he provides holistic live and lead by design coaching, leadership, communication skills, personal development, and workplace stress. That is a lot those are a lot of skills, Ahmad, that you facilitate through your business, and they all sound so important and very interesting. So Ahmad, welcome to my session, or to this session. And Ahmad and I know each other from we belong to the Passion Test Lab sessions, and we are both Passion Test facilitators and trainers. And we can talk a little bit about that, Ahmad, a little later. But I wanted to start with, your understanding between relationships and communications, because that's going to be the theme of today's talk. So, can you just introduce that topic and tell us a little bit about, what you feel is that relation, is that synergy?
Thank you, Rosanna, for this introduction. I just want to go a little bit into the introduction. We both come from the Passion Test, and the purpose of the Passion Test is to give us clarity, right?
Yes.
Clarity about what is important. So here also, let me provide some clarity. I am a master trainer of verbal Aikido, which is Aikido is a Japanese martial art.
Okay.
And it's good that you mentioned related to the so many skills that I have. And what I would like to do is related to my story. So I have been on planet Earth for over 7 decades, 70 years plus. So over this period, I have accumulated a lot of experience and the skill sets that are associated with them. Mm-hmm. Starting from that, I would like to mention that in my 7+ decades of life, what I have experienced is that what I have observed and I have experienced and I have watched other people, I have reached to this conclusion that the quality of our life depends on the quality of our relationships. Mm-hmm. And the quality of our relationships depend on the skill set of our communications. As a matter of fact, I just posted 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn my understanding of communications and how it is related to relationships. Mm-hmm. And my observation is, and I want to challenge your viewers in any way, if they can find any exception, is that all of the pains and pleasures in our life are related to our relationships.
Interesting.
That's how powerful relationships are. It doesn't have to be, and in this context, what I mean is that if we have a problem with our car, mm-hmm. it is because we have relationship with our car. We are not bothered by somebody else's car.
True.
If it is in the garage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If we have problem with our finances, it means that there is an issue in our relationships with money. Mm-hmm. If we have an illness in our body, it means that there is an issue in our relationships with that part of the body.
Right, because and it's very interesting that you're saying that, because when I think of relationships, or I'm sure many people, whenever they think of relationships, they think of relationships with people. Yeah. But here we do have relationships with objects, with things, with right?
Exactly, with everything. It's our relationship, and it is determined by actually the intensity of the pleasure and the pain that we'll experience also depends on the distance between ourselves and that object that we are going to refer to, or that person or that thing. For example, we know that there are earthquakes, there are supernovas, there are so many other things in the cosmos, in the universe, in other galaxies, but because it's distant so far, we are not affected by it. Here on planet Earth, where the distance is close, if it rains, we are affected. If it is too hot, we are affected. If it's too cold, we are affected. It's the distance of our relationship with the object or with the person that affects. I wanted to clarify this kind of interrelationship that we have with our environment and how it affects us in terms of our experiencing pain and pleasure. And then I want to come to it that it all depends on how we communicate with the people, with the objects, and with the things in our environment.
Right, because we take it for granted. We think that communicating is just verbal communicating, but it's communicating in so many facets, in so many different ways.
Yeah. So one of my mentors and teachers, James McNeil, who is the creator of the verbal Aikido. And he has a quotation that I use all the time. He says that communication is almost everything, and almost everything communicates. It's that important. So if, for example, I'm holding this pen, it communicates so many things. First, it communicates about its size, its shape, the colors, the combination, the text that is on it. This is all communications, and we perceive it in a particular way. So everything communicates. Now, how it affects us depends on the filters that we build. The filters that we have built as we grow up as to how we should interact or react or act in relation to that thing or that person.
So are those filters learned, or are they assumed by us?
Those filters, so in my book, The Leadership Zone, I refer to a concept called reality loop. And the reality loop explains that all our ideas, our roadmap for life, our paradigms and everything, they're affected by three things. Our environment, our education, and our experience.
Okay.
And if we don't like the outcome of what we do in our life, the best place to make the changes is in those three. Either we change our environment or we change our experience. We gain new experience, or we re-educate ourselves.
And when you say environment, that's huge because the environment could be at home, at work.
The environment includes our DNA also.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a huge in Coachwell, which is one of the first companies that was established to start modern day coaching, they have come up with this concept of the 9 environments of you. And they have split the one environment that we look at into 9 different components. And that is our self, the body, our body, our self, our finances, our relationships, our mimetic environment. The mimetic environment is the environment of all those people, like our parents, our teachers, our people in the church, community leaders that influence us, that are with us 24/7.
Right.
They all form some kind of environment that shapes our thinking and through which we establish our filters, through which we see things and perceive things. It's like the color of the lenses.
Right.
If they are pink, we'll see many things pink. If they are green, we'll see a thing green.
And we sort of have control almost of how we build those filters, maybe, or how we perceive. Would you agree or?
Oh, yes and no.
Mhm.
It has both answers. It depends on where we are. Okay. If we have developed this perception from early childhood
Mhm.
that I want to be the cause of my environment,
Mhm.
then we will make an effort to have control
Right.
over it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But if we are brought up in an environment where we say we are the effect, we are made by our circumstances, we don't make our circumstances, then won't have control over it. We'll have a lot of excuses.
Right. It's sort of like playing the victim.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, victimism is a very powerful way of life because
Mhm.
um, it frees us from our responsibilities.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that personal responsibility is a very important concept in
Mhm.
personal development. And in my book, I refer to the various barriers that prevent us from reaching our full potential.
Mhm. Mhm.
And one of them is language. And when our language is structured around victimism and no personal responsibility, we are led in a whole different direction
Yeah.
than if we take personal responsibility for our circumstances.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So coming back to the
Yes.
communications
Yes.
with people, I think most people, your audience most probably may or may not be interested in this kind of philosophical approach to our relationships with things and with objects. They most probably are more interested in, well, how can we improve our relationship with those people who are around us,
Right.
right? With our loved ones, with our children,
Yeah,
parents,
because I
spouses.
absolutely I think everybody, would like ultimately, good relationships with one
Exactly,
another. Yeah.
with the people so
With the
that they
people.
will
Yeah.
enjoy, instead of having more of the pain, they will have more of the pleasure,
Right.
right? Okay, so I will come to this and come from three different viewpoints so
Uh-huh.
it will become clear. Item number one is that in our life, we all the time, or most of the time, we have experienced dealing with difficult people, right?
Yeah.
And we call them difficult conversations. But we rarely think that if we ask the person that we consider to be a very difficult person,
Hmm.
if we ask their opinion of what they think about us, how
What?
will we show, how will they see us?
So turn it around almost.
Most research shows that they think that we are the difficult people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, and the reason is like this. I'll tell you. Uh, I have explored this situation from three different perspectives.
Hmm.
One of them is looking at it, uh, what is in my book, The Leadership Zone. Are, I refer to 7 laws of communication, and they're
Hmm.
very powerful rules or uh, realities that
Hmm.
affect our communications. Whatever I call it in my book, I refer to them as the laws of communication. They're so powerful. And I bring this example that, like the law of gravity. The
Uh-huh.
law of gravity says that this object, when I'm holding in my hand, if I drop it, theoretically it should go to the center of the earth.
Hmm.
Okay, it will fall down, it will go to the center of the earth. However, it won't go because the desktop or the floor of the where I am or the ground will hold it and it won't go to the center. But the
Hmm.
law is there, and human being was familiar with it and aware of this situation
Hmm.
of how what gravity was and how it worked.
Yeah.
But until Isaac Newton described it, how it works,
Hmm.
human being was not able to design airplanes, to design gliders and balloons and rockets
Uh-huh.
and send them to outer space and how it works and how the universe, how our solar system is regulated by gravity and stuff like that. It's only after Isaac Newton discovered that when the apple fell and hit his head, and then it triggered his thought process and came up with a solution, human being didn't know how to exploit it. And these rules of communications, human being has been communicating since history started, since human beings started speaking. And even before that, when they were using sign language.
Yes.
They were communicating. But once we know these laws, how they work and how it affects, then suddenly we become the masters of the communication.
Right.
And then we avoid difficult situations. So I will tell you what these sevens are.
Obviously, I was going to say, are you going to share with us?
I will just name them. I will just name them and perhaps relate to only a couple of them in some respect.
Yes.
To remember it properly, I've created an acronym, and that acronym is SPA, the three-letter SPA, and SEAT, S-E-A-T, to go and sit in a spa until your turn comes, whatever service you want.
Yeah.
So the first S stands for the law of space.
Okay.
So for communications to be effective, there has to be space for it in which it is effective.
Okay.
The second law is the law of presence. And the law of presence is that for two people to communicate with each other, they have to be rationally present.
Yes. Yeah.
The third is the law of assumptions. So we, for example, if I bring here in North America in the past 3 months, if we talk about Ukraine and Russia, there is so much publicity that Ukraine is the victim and Russia is the aggressor, etc. So we already have made certain assumptions based on this reality loop information, the environment that we are living in.
What we're hearing.
Right?
Yeah.
That assumption. But if you will ask a person who lives in Japan or a person who lives in the Middle East, they won't think the same way as we think.
Right.
Okay. So that is, these assumptions are important too. So to communicate effectively, we have to know what your assumptions are and what my assumptions are.
Okay.
The third one is the law. The fourth one is the law of state.
Okay.
And the law of state says that for communication to be effective, we have to know in which state the two people are. So if I'm optimistic, if I'm high energy, the result will be one thing. If I'm depressed, if I'm in a state of anxiety and very emotional, anger, etc., those are all various emotional states or tones, then the result of the communication will be different.
Totally different, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Then there is the law of empathy. If we are empathetic, you will listen empathetically to the other person, have active listening, and we will understand them much better than if we don't know how to use the law of empathy.
Right.
And the sixth one is the law of acknowledgement.
Okay.
And the law of acknowledgement is that when you are talking, I have to show some signs of life and make you aware that I'm listening, that, I will maybe have some gestures. Yeah, aha, yeah, okay. But acknowledgement goes much more further than that. Acknowledgement is a very powerful tool for repairing things, for healing things. It's a healing, since your program is related to healing.
Yes.
The law of acknowledgement and the use of the law of acknowledgement will be a good tool in relation to that. So the law of acknowledgement also says that when you acknowledge the other person appropriately and genuinely, you can repair broken relationships.
Yes. Yeah.
You can heal emotional and psychological and mental scars with acknowledgement. But over and above that, you can even heal physical ailments and scars with acknowledgement. And I want to go back to that relationship with our body parts and how we communicate with them. If we will appreciate and acknowledge our feet, for example, that we have been walking for decades on them, our hands that is providing means for our survival and thriving, our heart that has been beating non-stop since we were in the womb of our mothers till now. If we acknowledge them, they will be appreciated. And the saying is that what you appreciate appreciates.
Right. So I want to talk for, maybe we can just park that for a bit for later on, because I'd like to, with acknowledgement, I think there's a sense of gratitude as well. So maybe we can talk about how that relates. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just to do the last one.
Yes.
The last law of communication is the law of truth. And it is very simple. The law says that in order to have effective communications, you have to know that there is no one version of truth. There are multiple versions of truth. And difficult conversations start when we think that my idea is the truth and the other person, what the other person is saying is not truth.
Yes.
But if we accept that, well, the way I look at the truth is this way, and the one you look at the truth is different. So if I will, for example, hold this pen in my hand, and I have a group of 10 people, and without telling them anymore, say, please write one paragraph about what I'm holding in my hand. You will find out that no two writings will be identical or even similar. They will be much different, right? So just understanding that one law, that my opinion is not the truth, it is an opinion. And your opinion is not the truth, it's an opinion. And somebody else's opinion is an opinion, not the truth. And let's exchange our opinions with respect and understanding and get at the truth as a result of that.
Yeah, but some people do think that their opinion is the truth sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why they think other people are difficult, but because they are so fixed and rigid, they become the difficult people.
That's right. Yeah.
And they actually create difficult conversations that lead to negative relationships, that breakdown of relationships and things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
So this was one way of looking at it, at the relationships and the communications from the perspective of the laws of communication. There is another approach also, and you might have seen or heard or perhaps experienced yourself that somebody talks to you and you respond that, oh my God, you are talking like my mother. Or you are talking like a silly child, or you are talking like this, etc.
Right, yeah.
And there is a certain amount of truth in it. So Dr. Eric Berne, who is a Canadian psychoanalyst and an MD, 50, 60 years ago, he came with this concept of, if we call it now modern day in common, in layman's terms, states, ego states.
Yes.
Okay, he called them eds at that time, but now they are ego states. And simplifying, there are 6 different ego states that reside within each one of us. And they are the ego states: critical parent ego state, nurturing parent ego state, adult ego state, spontaneous child ego state, withdrawn child ego state, and angry child ego state. And so when we communicate with other people, when we are not aware, over time of those 6 ego states, 1 or 2 will become dominant and the other will be pushed to the side, to the back burner. Okay? So, but when we talk with other people, without knowing what my dominant ego state is, I expect the other person to respond to what I say from their adult ego state,
So
to
no
be
matter
rational.
what. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
to be rational and mature and reasonable and respectful, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But the dynamics of communications in relationships is that if I speak from my dominant ego state, from a parent ego state,
Mm-hmm.
I am not inviting the adult in you. I'm inviting the child ego state in you.
Right.
And when you respond from your child ego state, if I am critical parent and you respond from angry child ego state, difficult conversation starts.
Mm-hmm. Or they go bad. Difficult
Yeah,
conversations
yeah.
go bad.
And the relationships are, broken or
Right.
terminated, or it becomes a painful situation.
Yes.
And yet, without knowing, I started that cycle,
Right.
that downward spiral, because I don't know what my ego state is. Again, if my dominant ego state is angry child, I'm not inviting the adult in the other person. I'm inviting the critical parent in the other
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
And then the communication doesn't become effective, doesn't become amicable,
Right.
and we get into bad relationships.
Right. Because I don't know if this is correct, but I'm always under the impression that, whenever you speak with your ego, it's always a problem because the ego wants to fight all the time. The ego wants to be defensive all the time.
Mhm.
And
And
so,
that's very true. I do in my presentations, I tell people that communication happens between people on a gradient scale.
mm-hmm.
On a gradient scale. At the top, communication is between souls. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And when the communication is between souls, we find soulmates.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the bottom, communication is between egos.
Mm-hmm.
In between, there is a different combination and variety of soul ego communications.
Right.
But at the very bottom, when the communication is between egos, two things can happen. If our egos are aligned, we might find business partners, we might find bid mates, we might find transactional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But if the egos are not aligned, if they are on a collision course,
Right.
we create bad relationships,
Yes.
animosity, suffering,
Yeah.
etc., and things like that that come from it. So that is how
Mm-hmm.
that happens. But we do have the six ego states within us, and we do communicate from one or the other. Once we realize, and this is part of the verbal Aikido, where we teach people and we make an assessment, they discover what their dominant ego state is. And just by realizing it, that, oh my God, this is how I communicate,
Uh-huh.
suddenly some of their relationships improve. But if they learn
Yeah.
how to manage the other person's ego states, then relationships flourish.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And so it sort of relates to, the personality tests.
Mm.
If you know your personality and you're aware of other people's personalities and what they might be, those can improve that relationship as well, because um, what might affect one person might not affect another person. So you're more almost aware of how they are taking in that information or how they're processing things. So it's more of an awareness that personalities do differ, and so we have to keep in mind that we're not made all the same. We don't have all the same personalities. Just like with the egos, we don't have the same egos.
That's so profound what you just said, and so right. I want to introduce another dimension into it,
Yes.
okay, and that is the emotional intelligence, how much it affects our
Yeah.
relationship with other people.
Yes.
And Daniel Goleman, who initially started this
Mm-hmm.
whole concept of emotional intelligence, and he did it when he wrote that book, Emotional Intelligence. He actually interviewed experts in neuroscience and in so many other
Mm-hmm.
sciences, and he put them together and said, this is how it works. there are 4 components to it. The first thing is self-awareness.
Yes.
You have to become aware as to how you are affected by what other people say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's so important. Yes.
Yeah. And the second component is, how do you manage that? Right. How do you control yourself now that you know that you are affected by triggers that other people utter or do or behave or something like that?
So it's self-management.
The third one is to find out how other people are affected by what you say or what somebody else says.
Right.
To understand that. And then the fourth part is relationship management. Now that you know all these dynamics, how you manage those relationships. And that comes into the assessments that you talk to. There are different types of assessments.
Right.
There is the DISC assessment, for example. There is the Colby Index A assessment. There is the
Myers-Briggs
assessment. And then what we have in the verbal Aikido is the communication science profile assessment, where you determine of these 6 egos, which one is the dominant one.
Yes, yeah. That's a great assessment to have, alongside the personality one. Yeah.
It's perhaps even the most powerful one, because you right away find out where the difficulties occur. Right. And it's part of what Dr. Eric Byrne calls structural analysis. So there are 2 different aspects to it. There is the structural analysis, is to understand what is my situation in terms of the 6 ego states.
Right.
Then there is transactional analysis, is now how, when I'm dealing with other people, how do I manage this dynamic of their ego states and my ego states?
Right. Because it's important. It's not like your 7 laws, because they sort of go hand in hand with what you're saying about knowing your own ego state and taking into account somebody else's ego state. Yeah.
So to come back to the actual topic of relationships and communications, when communications are effective, relationships flourish and healing occurs. We thrive. And when we are not aligned with those laws, and we are not aligned with the egos, then we have troubles in it. And here is where I want to come to this third viewpoint, to come to it. And that is our intentions. When we communicate with other people, what are our intentions? And there are 5 different ones. So hopefully we don't communicate from all 5, we communicate from 1. But let's say there are 5 different intentions that exist when people communicate with each other.
So are they all equal in weight, or is, because
well, some are very damaging and some are flourishing, I might say.
Okay, so when you so let's hear the 5. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is, I come to have a transaction with you or to talk with you with the intention of gain for me. Okay. As long as I gain, I don't care if you gain or lose. Okay. That is one of them.
And I'm sure we can all think of conversations like that have happened.
Very common, very common, very common. The second one is gain and pain.
Gain and pain, okay.
I come to the conversation with the intention of me gaining and you losing.
Okay.
The third one is pain and gain. I accept a lower level of pain to give you the impression that you have gained something in order to avoid a bigger pain.
Okay.
This is not very common, but it is very much used in abusive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That the abused will accept a lower level of pain in order to avoid a bigger pain. And
Right.
the abuser will have a feeling of triumph.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
The, the fourth one is pain and pain. And
Okay.
that is that I don't mind to suffer as long as the other SUB
It's
suffers.
spring too. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some countries, when they go to war, actually comes from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it comes from that intention that is grounded in anger.
Yes.
When,
Yeah.
when the emotion is anger, they will harm themselves, damage themselves, as long as the other side gets damaged and harmed.
As well. Yeah. Yeah.
The one and only sustainable and desirable
Mm-hmm.
intention is gain and gain.
Yeah.
And in the long run, this is the only one that works, and this is the only one people should strive for.
Right. And even in the difficult conversations, you can still have gain and gain.
Of course,
It's done
of course,
properly. Yeah.
of course, that will be it. And there are a lot of details and dynamics that we cover in verbal Aikido and in my other program, which is called Difficult Conversations Made Easy.
Mm-hmm.
We scratch the surface of this kind of how relationships and communications are interrelated.
Mm-hmm.
So if we learn these communication skills in terms of how the laws work, how the ego states work,
Mm-hmm.
and which intention we hold to have the communications,
Yeah.
then we can expect our relationships to thrive and our pleasure in this
Mm-hmm.
life to increase.
Yeah.
If we leave it by default, then it's like closing your eyes and throwing the dart at the
Mm-hmm.
dartboard. It
Mm-hmm.
might work or it might not work. But if we intentionally ignore them, then we go towards suffering and pain.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you because I think, I in my work, I get a lot of people saying, well, why should I be the only one who's doing this? So, I mean, it has to be mutual. So how do you deal with, I mean, I'm sure you've had clients as well who would say, well, yeah, I'm putting these laws into practice, but nothing's being reciprocated.
Very good. That's a very good question. First of all, when we teach these concepts
Mm-hmm.
and when we bring people through exercises, we don't just address you, we address the other one also.
Okay. So are they
Okay?
both there? Are the
Even if they are not both there, like the purpose is that this is for every human being. And when two people come together in communications,
Mhm.
those instructions are for both of them. This is
Right.
item number one. Item number two is that the person who initiates the conversation
Mhm.
takes responsibility.
Yeah.
And it depends on their strength of
Uh-huh.
character
Yeah.
to see whether how much that responsibility goes. Does that responsibility stop with them, or it can extend to cover the other side also?
Right. It's like you're being the driver, right? Of
Yes. And once you know how to manage interactions of the other people, then you don't need to think that, well, the other side doesn't reciprocate, because you create the conditions for reciprocation.
excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what happens.
Do you have any examples of your relationships that flourished after you practiced all of these tools and
I resonated with this. I have always worked as a mediator.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
In different situations, I mediate between people. Even in some corporations where I worked,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of the go-between between the two opposite poles
Okay.
and try to bring them together. Last year, we created actually a mediation team to mediate between the warring factions in Afghanistan.
Mm.
And we contacted a lot of the stakeholders and the parties to the conflict there. And we developed programs and things like that. I moderated an international conference on that, what is happening, where the former Prime Minister of Malaysia was the keynote speaker in that program. So it has helped me a lot, and it has validated my position in that case. Looking at it from that reality loop perspective, I don't take a very extreme position, even of people who are in extreme positions. I look at them as to what would have been the 3 E's: their environment, their experience, and their education that led to that position, to that viewpoint.
Right. So you're kind of analyzing.
Yes. Yeah.
Them. Yeah. Yeah. Great. So the 7 Laws, which book is it in? It's not the...
It's in the book, in the Leadership Zone.
The Leadership Zone book. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's where you go through each of the 7 laws in a lot of detail.
That's correct.
So we'll have a link down. We'll have a link in the description. Lead by Design Coach and Educator. So what is that book? That's a book as well, right?
That's not a book. That is the system. That is my coaching system.
Okay.
It's holistic coaching. I coach in groups. I also coach individually. And so my coaching is not either for career or life, etc. I don't differentiate. I don't think people can separate their life from their career. They are intertwined. They affect each other. So my approach is very holistic. I look at the whole person in terms of, their paradigms, their relationships, their blueprint, where their potential is. And I take them through the 6 barriers that actually prevent us from reaching our full potential.
Oh, excellent. That sounds really interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to have you back, Ahmad, because there's so much more that we can talk about. But I wanted to thank you for sharing all this information, this valuable information. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and talking to us and chatting. And we'll have to do this again some other time.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share these ideas and concepts with your audience. I hope they will benefit from it, and I hope that when you post it, they will have comments and ask questions and things like that.
Yes, please do.
The important thing is that they engage with your post.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's practical, valuable information that we could all use. And yes, please comment. If I can't answer you, I'm going to go to Ahmad, and he'll also join in on the comments as well. But thank you so much, and take care.
Bye.
Bye.